USA.com, there is a little YouTube button. If you click on that, it takes you right to the channel on YouTube. But if you're watching from AOAUSA.com, it's totally fine. You can type in questions into the chat there. And for those of you that are watching, that are logged into the Zoom meeting, just there's a button to raise your hand. And if I go to it shows there's a raise hand button there. And if you click on that, we'll see it. And then when there are questions, we can have you speak. You can use your audio. If you're unpresentable, please just put your question in the chat. And that way we won't see your bedhead. And anyway, so we're going to get to this. Our speaker today, he's done over 250,000 evictions. Oh, yeah, we'll just go for it. Has over 45 years of experience. He's almost up to 30 attorneys on his staff. I really enjoy watching or reading the legal Q&A in the magazine. It's there every month, and so thank you so much for putting that together. He's the founder and president of the law office of Dennis P. Block and Associates. So Dennis, it's great to have you on. Let's see.
Always a pleasure to do this for you, Jeff. And I think that these seminars are invaluable to our community. And my hat's off to your association for putting these all together at your expense to educate the community because we know that the politicians, the tenants, they're all coming after us. And we're, quote, the villain when it comes to the media looks at us. So we have to know what our rights are and protect ourselves because there are marauding attorneys out there that are trying to sue every landlord they can or make complaints to different legislative bodies and trying to just put all landlords, especially small landlords, out of business. So the topic of the day is navigating the confusing rent increase laws of California. And there is so much confusion on when rents can be raised and to what extent. But one thing is certain, and that is every time you have the legal opportunity to raise rent on income property, you must do it. You must do that. So it doesn't matter that you think the person's a nice person, he doesn't give me any trouble. We don't know where these rent control laws are going, but we all know that they're coming and they're coming after us. So never let a lawful rent increase go by without taking advantage of it. Our job is to get our properties up to market value. The politicians' jobs are to put us out of business. So we're kind of at cross purposes here. So really what we need to do is to make sure that we know the laws, when can we raise rents, and then at that opportunity, we need to raise our rents. Um, you might know, and Jeff's father gave me this line, and that is that these issues dealing with rent control are tantamount to tenant welfare. I got that from your dad, Dan, and it always stuck with me that that's exactly what rent control is. It's tenant welfare. And unlike social welfare that goes to the truly needy, tenant welfare goes to anybody. You don't have to prove anything. You could have $5 million in a bank account, and yet your rent is limited to a 3% rent increase. So it's totally unfair. And unlike social welfare, which is paid for by the populace through our tax dollars, tenant welfare, i.e., rent control, is put on the shoulders of one individual property owner. You're personally supporting that person who's in a unit where you could get another $1,000 for it. You are personally without any governmental help, but only a governmental edict being required to basically support this person. And again, this person could have $4 million in a bank account. It makes no difference. So my hat's off to your father coming up with that coined phrase of tenant welfare. So before we go into the topic of how much can we raise it? And we know we're going to raise it as soon as we can. Let's talk about the proper ways that we're supposed to raise rent. If you are raising rent 10% or less, it's a 30-day notice. If you are raising rent in excess of 10%, it's a 90-day notice. Okay, there is no such thing in the state of California as a 60-day rent increase notice. That's out the window. So once again, if it's a if you're raising rent 10% or less, a 30-day notice. If you're raising rent more than 10%, it's a 90-day notice. Now, how do you serve a notice? Well, you can hand it to the tenant. That's one way. Or if you're not going to hand it to the tenant, you can mail it to the tenant. And that's also a proper way to serve a rent increase notice, just by mail. Can you do it by regular mail? Of course. Do you have to do it certified mail return receipt? And the answer is no, you don't. However, practicality will state that the tenant might claim that he is going to claim that he didn't get the notice. So I recommend that if you are going to mail it to him, do it with a post office certificate of mailing. It's very inexpensive. It just proves that you've mailed it. Or you can do it by certified mail. If you do it by certified mail, do not choose return receipt requested. You don't want to have the tenant sign for anything. So you can send it by certified mail and then where he doesn't have to sign for it, and then you'd be able to track to see that it got there. Okay? Now, the difference between serving it by mail or by handing it to them comes to the issue of the 5-day mailing rule. We have a 5-day mailing rule. If you hand it to them, then you just got to do it 30 days in advance or 90 days if it's in excess of 10%. But if you're mailing it, then you got to give them an extra 5 days. So a 30-day notice is now a 35-day notice. A 90-day notice is now a 95-day notice. So for example, if you on June 1st, well, let's actually make it July 1st. If you on July 1st served a notice to your tenant less than 10% to take effect August 1st and you mailed it, that's going to be an improper notice. That's going to be an improper notice because it doesn't allow for an extra 5 days. So if you wanted to make a rent increase to be effective as of August 1st, then you'd have to do it by June 25th, yesterday, and then that would allow the extra 5 days for mailing. So make sure if you're going to use rent increase for either for a 30 or a 90 and you're just mailing it, make sure you do it way before the 25th of that previous month. You want to do it way before that so they'll have more than 35 days to do it. Now, I do want to share my screen here because we know that the wonderful Apartment Owners Association has wonderful forms, and this is one of their forms. This is a 30-day notice to change the terms of tenancy. You'll notice that it's fillable, so you can actually type in names if you wanted to and fill it out. And you're basically, this one talks about security deposit and other issues. But the most important thing is that you're in this box here, that your monthly rent will be increased from, and then you would put $1,000. And if this was, let's pretend a 3% rent increase, then that would be 1,030, an increase of $30 as the form goes here. And then, of course, you would date it in this spot here. And then let's put in a date. Well, actually, I better make this the 25th because we've already lost it if we're going to mail it. And then, of course, you would put your owner's name and the agent's. Okay. Oops, hit something there. So that is the form that you can get from the Apartment Owners Association. This form will also work as a 90-day notice form because you'll notice that it states here that this becomes effective 30 days or upon this date, whichever is later in time. So it actually would work for a 90-day notice. Jeff, do you know if you have a 90-day notice on the
Yeah, we
website?
do. Yeah, there's the 90-day notice, and there's ones that are some of them have to be city specific. So yeah, there's a variety of those. Yeah.
Okay, good. So, but this one would work as a 90-day notice because you're going to put this date in 90 days from the date that you're serving the notice. And you don't want to have a notice where the rent, here, let's stop sharing here, where the rent increase is in the middle of the month. That just doesn't work. It's got to be effective as to the due date. So if your rent's payable on the first, then you got to make it so that that rent increase becomes effective as to that specific due date. Okay, so now we know how to prepare a notice of rent increase. We now know how to serve a notice of rent increase. And we now know how much time we have to give. So the next question is, how do we know what the rent increase should be? Well, let's start with the best one, and that is where there is unlimited rent increases. We like those the best. So in other words, you can immediately raise the rent to market value. So in what cases can you do that? Because we all know that the entire state of California is either under statewide rent control or it's under a local rent control like West Hollywood or Los Angeles or Santa Monica, etc. So where can you do an unlimited rent increase? And that is single family residences, townhomes, condominiums, properties that are 15 years, uh, not over 15 years of age, in terms of its certificate of occupancy. Also, when the unit becomes vacant, you can do that. So where the original tenant, your tenants just vacate the unit, you can do that. So once again, and I don't care, and I've said this so many times before, I don't care that your property is owned by a corporation. I don't care how long the tenant's been there. As long as the tenant is not on a fixed term lease and it is a single family home, a townhouse, or a condominium, or the property was built within the last 15 years, or your unit has become vacated, you have the right to raise the rent as much as you like, as much as you like. Um, the issues dealing with this emergency state that you might know regarding in LA County only, where the governor created this state of emergency and stated that you couldn't raise rent more than 10%. I personally didn't think that that applied to those items that I'm talking about, even though you might get something from the state attorney general in the mail telling you that you violated the law, because the law that I'm talking about is the Costa-Hawkins Rental Housing Act, which they tried to revoke in the last elections and lost miserably. And that law, of course, states that notwithstanding any other law, and I presume and that means emergency laws, that you have the right to raise the rent in any of those scenarios. However, we don't have to push the button because the state of emergency, as declared by our wonderful governor, is over as of July 7th, coming up in just a few days. So if you're going to have a rent increase, you want to go as high as you want. July actually wouldn't count. So that would be August, September, October. It would be November 1st. So if you serve a notice anywhere in the middle of July, you'll be past the quote emergency period. And now for if I have a single family home or a house that's coming up for rental, it's vacant, you can raise the rent to whatever you like. Okay. So, and I know we get a lot of blowback on that, and people think that, oh my God, the house is in a corporation or the house, the tenants lived there for 15 years and he's invalid and whatever. It's irrelevant, okay? And that's for any jurisdiction. I don't care that you're in Los Angeles or unincorporated area of LA County. Those places you are allowed to raise the rent to market level. Got a vacant unit? Somebody just left? Great. Get out and figure out what the market value is for that rental unit. I always tell landlords that if you want to check that out, one easy way to do it is to go to a website called Rentometer. That's RENT, the letter O, meter.com. The first five are free. I feel like a spokesman for them, even though I pay for a yearly fee. but you put in your address and how many bedrooms and what kind of a property it is, and it'll spit out all the properties in the neighborhood and what they went for. And really check that out and figure out if you're below market because you want to get your properties to market level. So if I've got a tenant who's sitting in this condominium and I'm going to check it out, I'm going to be able to raise his rent. Again, I would wait past, just to be on the safe side, wait past um, July 7th before serving that notice to take effect as of November 1st. Now, there's another time that you can raise the rent to market value, even if your property is subject to the rent stabilization ordinance for the city of Los Angeles. And that is this scenario. You rent to two tenants. They both signed the rental agreement. And we're going to call these two tenants A and B. Then sometime thereafter, C moved in. You didn't do anything about it. You didn't care. And then all of a sudden, A starts paying you the rent as normal. B pays you the rent. But then after a while, C starts paying you the rent. And you've accepted rent from C and you're in a very uh, onerous rent control, like, for example, Los Angeles or even unincorporated areas of LA County. And let's take the scenario one step further, and that is that A and B move out. And then after they moved out, you continue to take rent from C. In that scenario, as long as A and B didn't give you a written notice that they were moving out, and even though you've taken rent from C without A and B even being there for many months, you have the right to raise the rent to market level to C by serving a proper rent increase notice. So, and I don't care what jurisdiction you're in, because again, this is under the Costa-Hawkins Rental Housing Act. You are allowed. So if you can think of a situation like that where the original tenants moved out and where a person moved in after the inception of the tenancy, and even though you've taken rent from that tenant, you have the right to raise the rent to market level. Now, what's another one? This is only for properties that are subject to statewide rent control. We're not talking about a local rent control jurisdiction. For example, like Culver City. There's so many places now that have it. Glendale. I'm only talking about statewide rent control. And under statewide rent control, if you own a duplex and you live in that duplex and you lived in that duplex and rented it out to another tenant, the other side of that duplex. Now, again, a duplex is not two separate houses on one property. That's not a duplex. A duplex is one structure that contains two units. That's a duplex. And if you did rent it out under statewide rent control, that's another exception to rent control under the state statute, and you'd be able to raise the rent to your neighbor who shares a wall with you, and you'd be able to raise it to market level. Okay, let's move on. We're now going to talk about statewide rent control. Statewide rent control. Your property is subject to statewide rent control if, number one, it's not subject to a local rent control district. If it's not subject to a local rent control district, and you have more than one unit on one property that was built more than 15 years ago, then guess what? You are subject to statewide rent control. So if I have a duplex that I don't live there in the city of Burbank, where my office is, in which you can see Burbank right over my shoulder there, um, then you're subject to statewide rent control. And if you are subject to statewide rent control, they limit what you can charge. So what's the amount that you can charge? Under statewide rent control, you're entitled to charge 5% plus the CPI, this Consumer Price Index, which was established every year in the month of April. In the month of April every year, and then that becomes effective as of August 1st. So whatever the CPI is in April, then on August 1st, you're allowed to charge that CPI rate plus the 5%. Well, as of April of 2025, the CPI rate is, Jeff, do you know? You're muted, but but I could tell from lip
For
syncing.
all of California or
No,
for
just
LA?
for LA. Good question. All of LA and Orange County.
It's 3%
How much?
for 3% plus the 5%, so 8%
You're
starting
correct.
August 1st.
I got to make sure you're listening. That's why I try to engage you during these things. I don't want you slipping off on me. But
Ah,
uh, anyway, for Los Angeles and Orange County, it is 3%. So you add 3% to the 5%, that's a total of 8%. And that can be effective as of August 1st of 2025 coming up. If you're in Riverside or San Bernardino, as of April 1st, the CPI was 2.5%, so that would be a total of 7.5%. And for my good friends up north in San Francisco, Oakland, or the Hayworth area, the CPI as of April was 1.3%. So the total for those areas would be 6.3%. You want to make sure that if you have the ability and you're in a statewide rent control and you haven't raised the rent in the last year, you want to make sure that you do that rent increase. You're going to get some crazy politician who's going to want to, you know what? I think it's fair to let's just every rent gets knocked down by 50%. I mean, we don't know where this is going. So we want to make sure that our rents are exactly what they should be, which is market value. I can't go through all the local jurisdictions, but I am going to go through a few of them. City of Los Angeles, if you have a property that was built prior to October 1st, 1978, that it received its certificate of occupancy prior to that date, as of July 1st of this coming month, the rent increase, the whopping rent increase that they gave you is 3%. It's insanity. 3%. This is with our insurance going up, our vendors and expenses going up through the roof. This is just insane. They're giving us a whopping 3%. And the irony, the absolute irony is if you have property that's subject to RSO, rent stabilization ordinance, built prior to July 1st, the irony is that they make you pay interest on security deposits. You know what the interest is for this year? It's 4.3%. How do they justify that? That a landlord has to pay the tenant 4.3% interest on their security deposit, but a landlord's only entitled to a 3% rent increase. I don't know about you, but let's march down to City Hall and let's see if we can bring some weapons. No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding. Let's move on. For unincorporated areas of LA County, uh, it's even more pathetic. They have three categories, either general landlords, which is 1.93%, small property landlords, 2.93%. By the way, small property owners are owners with 10 or few units in LA County, 10 or fewer units in LA County. They have some crazy formula, but that's basically what it is. That would be a 2.930 rent increase. And if you have a luxury unit, it's 3.93%. And then they have the definition of a luxury unit. And by the way, nobody has a luxury unit. That would be impossible. Those are buildings that have where two bedrooms or less is located within a single structure which has 25 or more units. And that as of September 1st, 2018, the landlord received for that two-bedroom unit $4,000 or more. Where did they get that formula? Let's try that again. The building's got to have 25 units, okay, minimum. And then we're talking about units that are two-bedroom or less, or a two, one, or a single, that the rent for that unit as of September 11, 2018 was 4,000 or more. Well, that's going to bring in a lot of cases. And assuming you're that lucky, these are unincorporated areas of LA County. It's a lousy 3.93%. Okay, West Hollywood, 3%. Santa Monica, 3%. But then they throw in, you can't make this stuff up. Then they throw in a little kicker. It's a whopping 3%, but it can't exceed a cap of $76. So even if whatever the rent is, but the 3% was more than a $76 per month rent increase, oh, you're limited. So you do want to make sure that if your property is located in other municipalities such as Glendale or Culver City or coming to a Pasadena or coming to a location, you want to go on that city's website and you want to make sure that you're charging the correct amount of rent. Because if you charge the wrong amount of rent, all hell breaks loose. Tenant can come after you years down the line, try to get attorney's fees against you. So you want to make sure that you check. Generally, you can figure it out by going to the website. I know you can call my office at 1-800-77-EVICT, and I'm sure the AOA also will have that information. But you do want to make sure that you don't make a mistake when doing this. Now, some jurisdictions, such as Los Angeles and unincorporated areas of West Hollywood, or even West Hollywood, have certain rules that you have to register your unit. For example, in the city of West Hollywood, you have to register when that tenant moved in. And we've seen time and time again where the tenant moved in, you charged what was legally you were allowed to charge, but for whatever reason, you didn't register that unit with that tenant and what he moved in, what was the starting rent for that unit. Then what happens is, let's say 10, 15 years go by and you follow the letter of the law to the T. You're just increasing that rent, that whopping 3% or whatever it has been for the last 10 years, and you did it religiously, and you did it certainly in accordance with the city of West Hollywood. But you see, you didn't register that tenant. So all those rent increases that you gave were for naught. They're illegal, which means you have to now disgorge all those rent increases for the last 10 years. And we've seen clients that have done this. So you want to make sure that you check with the jurisdiction that you have the unit registered. Right now, as we know, that if your property was under RSO, it was built prior to October 1st, 1978 for the city of Los Angeles, you had to register that unit. You had to get a registration certificate. Well, now our wonderful city council of Los Angeles states that if your property is not under RSO, that it's now considered under JCO, the Just Cause Ordinance, and you have to register every residential unit, I don't care, brand new, you've got to register that with the city. You got to go online. You've got to register that unit. If you don't, then technically you can't even bring forth an unlawful detainer action for non-payment of rent. So you must follow the rules for your particular jurisdiction. And again, every single residential unit, that $85,000 a month mansion in Brentwood, has to be registered with the city. You're either under RSO, the Rent Stabilization Ordinance, or you're under JCO. Okay, so register that unit. Now, what happens when you listen to everything Dennis Block told you and you raise the rent and it was a proper rent, your place is registered, you're 100% correct, and you raise it a whopping $30 from 1,000 to 1,030 because you're entitled to a 3% rent increase. And then the day comes, July 1st, and the tenant offers you $1,000. Wait a second. What about that rent increase? Nah, I'm not paying it. In that situation, you do not want to accept a partial payment of rent. You tell that tenant, look, I properly raised your rent. I got my proof of mailing from the post office. You got it. This is a lawful rent increase. My units are registered. I want my rent. He says, I'm not going to pay you. And then you know what you say? You say, good. Because what you're going to do is you're then going to serve a notice to pay rent or quit for the rent that's owed, and therefore you'll be able to evict the tenant. Now, remember that there is crazy way the law works, and that is if you evict a tenant for cause, like non-payment of rent, or they brought in a small giraffe into the unit in violation of the rental agreement, you get to evict the tenant, and then the law says you can raise the rent to market value. So they're rewarding you. It sounds crazy. City Council of Los Angeles and every other municipality that started rent control rewards you if you can evict the tenant. That's an easy way to get your rents to market value. So right now, I'm going to share my screen again because I can. And there we go. So this is the handy dandy notice to pay rent or quit that's on the Apartment Owners Association website. For a member, again, you can take care of this. It's pretty easy to fill this out. You do have to be careful that you are in the city of Los Angeles and unincorporated areas of LA County. You have to be above the fair market value threshold in order to serve a 3-day notice. I know for a one bedroom, I think it's $2,081. So it would have to be above that, but you don't want to take that partial payment because you want to be able to serve this notice. So if you took the partial payment, the $1,000, and then what happens is you are only going to be owed $30 and you're never going to be able to serve a 3-day notice because you're below the threshold. I think I have it here. Let me close this down real quick. And let's get this up if I can. Let's get the fair market value so you guys can see this. And now let's share our screen again. I think this will work. Uh, Stop sharing. Oop, let's try that again. So I want you to show you what the fair market value is. There we go. So as you can see here, for a one bedroom, it's $2,081. A two bedroom, it is $2,625. So you can't really serve a 3-day notice unless you're above the threshold. You can see for an efficiency or a single apartment, it's 1856. These are going to go up in October, but right now. So if you do serve that rent increase notice and the tenant refuses to pay, think to yourself, that's really good because if I can serve that 3-day notice because I'm not accepting a partial payment, then you'll be able to evict your tenant. Now, what happens if, which happens in a lot of cases, they go to the portal, like of course the Apartment Owners Association has a wonderful management portal where you can pay rent online there, or a lot of tenants Zelle. And then of course the landlord thinks he's quote stuck that, hey, he sent me the money, so now I'm stuck. Well, that answer is not true. If he zells it to you, you can zell it back if you can. If not, then you could just write out your own personal check and send that to the tenant with a note saying you've made an unauthorized deposit into my account because I do not accept partial payments. I do not accept partial payments. So definitely, if you're in a situation where the tenant has not paid the full amount of rent, paid that partial payment, didn't follow your rent increase notice, stand on your rights because, again, it's to your advantage and fill out one of the AOA 3-day notice forms. Make sure you're above the threshold. The city of LA does require that you upload a copy to their website. And I know I have information on that on my website at evict123.com. And that, my friends, concludes the wonderful topic of navigating the confusing rent increase laws in California. And now Jeff is going to assist me if I don't see anybody's hand raised. So if you can assist me by reading any questions that we have, and we'll see how good the old man is in terms of answering it. Jeff, I think you need to
There we
unmute.
go.
There you
Okay,
go.
yeah, let me see. I don't see any raised hands either. Let me see if there's a anything in the chat here. Okay. What about a lease that expires on 12/31/2025 in Los Angeles County? Do I need to give them a 90-day notice to increase rent more than 10% if we extend the lease for another year? It's a single family home. Oh, you're frozen.
Okay, so there's
Oh,
a
there we go.
agreement. If the
Okay.
lease is over and now it's January 1st, the two of you could sign a new rental agreement, and I'm supposing that this is a single family home, so you're not subject to any rent limitations or a condominium or a townhouse. You can walk over there on January 1st and say, here's the new rental agreement. I'm increasing the rent, $1,000. And if the two of you sign it, that's fine because that's exactly a agreement between the parties. But if you are unilaterally raising the rent through a rent increase notice, then yes, if you're going to go above 10%, that has to be a 90-day notice. And don't forget that 5-day mailing rule.
And maybe some people they think they can't raise it more than 10% in that situation because of the tenant protection ordinance, where then if they choose not to live there, you have to give them relocation. Is that maybe why people get that confused?
I know that it's not for ton of tenant protection under the city of Los Angeles. They have this economic displacement that if you
Right.
do give a rent increase that's above, now they're saying 8.9, it's going to be 8%. If the tenant chooses to not honor that and wants to move, then you have to pay relocation. Relocation for a single family home is only 1 month's rent. However, it is somewhat prohibitive if it's a condominium or an apartment house or a townhouse.
Hmm. Okay, in a duplex, if I upgrade, remodel significantly one side and that tenant leaves due to the major remodel, then then the tenants on the other side want to move into the newly remodeled side. Can I raise rent to market value?
If a tenant is moving in from one unit to another unit, that's considered it's not under rent control. You can charge whatever you want as long as he's changing units, even if it's in the same building. And by the way, renovation evictions apply to statewide rent control. However, under the Just Cause Ordinance, those properties built after October 1st, 1978, which is now under the Just Cause Ordinance, the city of Los Angeles had banned renovation evictions for JCO properties. But as of August 1st, unless they extend it, you are able to do a renovation eviction for JCO properties. So if you had somebody that is in an 8 unit building that was built in 1980. Well, now I'm under JCO. I'm only entitled under statewide rent control to an 8% rent increase. Well, now I can do that renovation eviction. And once he's gone, and by the way, the relocation is only 1 month's rent. Once he's gone, then you're allowed to raise the rent to market value.
Okay, great. Okay. Okay, great. Next one. What if a tenant pays below the rent increase amount through ACH auto payment?
And just as I was saying, you return it to him. If you could return it back the same way, great. If not, then just write your own personal check out, right? You've made an unauthorized deposit into my account. I don't accept partial payments. Mail it back. If he doesn't cash that check, no problem, as long as you mailed it back to him.
Yeah, in Orange County, single family home. So no max on the amount that can be raised on a single family home.
Absolutely. It's so much confusion on that issue, but
Yeah.
once again, single family home, townhouse, condominium, properties built within the last 15 years, unless there is a local, actually, it doesn't even matter if there's a local jurisdiction. You can raise the rent to market level.
Mhm. Okay. Tenants in San Bernardino rents are at 1,400 but pays late every month due to how they get paid at work. So what can be done? It's below market value.
Well, is this an apartment or house? Did they say?
I think let's just call it an apartment.
Okay, well, first of all, you can enforce your late charge provision. That's one way to do it. Or you can immediately serve a 3-day notice to pay the rent. Most people think that there's some sort of a 5-day grace period, and it might even say that in your rental agreement, but that only talks about when the late charge kicks in.
Mhm.
So if rent is payable on the first, then you're allowed to serve a 3-day notice on the second. So I would encourage you in that situation. Get out your 3-day notice, serve it on the second. The tenant will only have 3 business days thereafter to pay the rent. If he comes to you on the fourth day with the rent gift wrapped, you do not have to accept it.
All right. So what about a pet? The violation of the no pet deal. Can
Well, if
you?
a tenant brings in a pet in violation of the rental agreement, that would just be a 3-day notice to perform or quit. Again, these forms are on the AOA website. You
Mhm.
serve that notice, giving him 3 days to get rid of the dog. At the end of the third day, if the dog is still there, then you have the right to bring forth an eviction. Now, a lot of people say, how do I know the dog is still there? Well, two ways. Number one, knock on the door. If you knock on the door, the dog's going to bark. And secondly, dogs have to go out for a walk. So you can always see the dog in the morning or in the afternoon. So it's not difficult to prove.
Yeah, and also remember, guys, we have the animal agreement, which applies to both pets and service animals. So just because it's a service animal doesn't mean it doesn't have to behave and like kind of not poop all over the place or whatever. So check that one out, add it to your rental agreement when you're starting a new one. There's a lot of forms there with the that should go with the lease. So always look at that move-in packet that we have because a lot of the forms are there. Okay, let me see. Okay, Orange County are single family properties subject to just cause.
Good question. Uh, The issue is when the rental agreement started. If the rental agreement started prior to November of 2020, then you are not subject to good cause to evict. If the rental agreement was entered into after November 1st of 2020, then you need good cause to evict unless you check the box for that single family residence in the rental agreement that states this property is exempt from statewide rent control. Now that phrase is in the AOA rental agreement. So if you're dealing with a townhouse condominium, or a single family residence or a property built within the last 15 years, make sure that you check that box. This property is exempt from statewide rent control, the Tenant Protection Act. And if it is checked, then you're good to go. And if you just don't like the person, just serve the person a notice to quit. You don't have to have a reason.
And if you're looking at the AOA rental agreement, there's that box and then subject or exempt from statewide rent control. Right underneath it is the two boxes to check subject or exempt to that rent reporting. And so that's the next question. Excuse me. Do you have to offer that to the tenant? So that's the question. And so if your building has 16 units or more, then you need to offer it. And we do have the addendum for that you could do it. Um, and then AOA does have a service where you can do that. So anyway, that's if it's 16 units or more. And there's some other things where if it's an LLC with a oh, what is it?
A member that's a
A
corporation.
member that's a corporation, yeah, then
Yeah, very,
you're
very
also
unusual
required.
though for
Yeah,
that
it's
to be.
pretty, I've only seen that happen. I've only seen one member that has it that way. So it's pretty unusual.
Now, technically, if your tenant was already in, if you had 16 or more units, then you have to give them a notice or contract every year and asking them to sign it.
Right.
If you're just leasing out the property, then that phrase would be in the AOA rental agreement.
But really, beyond the law, if you have good renters, it's a way to reward them and help them build up their credit beyond being compelled to do it. So if it's not 16 units, it's not that it's not a matter of do I have to or not. It's more of a matter of do you like this renter and may they possibly benefit from it? And if you want to help them that way, then that's something that you can do and they pay for
Right.
it. So,
Have we had many people, to your experience, Jeff, that have opted in on that?
oh yeah, I mean, we have a ton of people. Yeah, I was surprised. There's a lot of people that have opted in on it. And it's building every month with that. So yeah. Okay, I'm confused. Uh, if I do a major renovation, not in LA County, how do I manage to ask tenant to leave?
Okay, well, first of all, under the state law, The definition of substantial renovation is work that will render the premises uninhabitable for at least 30 days and will also require that the work being performed would need a building permit. So the first thing you need to do is you need to get yourself a contractor who's going to give you, quote, the scope of the work in writing, which will show the type of work that he's going to do and why it's going to take longer than 30 days, and that the work that's required would necessitate obtaining a building permit. Then you actually have to obtain those permits. Then, with those two documents in your hand, you then have the right to serve your tenant with a 60-day notice, of presumably having lived there more than 1 year. And you have to also include those two documents with the notice that you're going to be giving to your tenant. And then that notice has to have special language in it, the notice to quit regarding the relocation money and what exactly you need to state. But again, before you even start, get yourself the scope of the work, documentation from your contractor, and also obtain the building permits.
Great. And just to recap the percentage increase for LA RSO,
Is now going to be 3%.
3%. There you go. So LA Wilmington, Wilmington would be if it's
Wilmington is really part of the city of Los Angeles.
yeah, it's part of the
It's
city
like
of LA.
Hollywood. Yeah.
So that question there, Sulama, it looks like it depends whether you're under rent control or not. So, but 3% if you're under rent control, and if you're not, then you fall under the general LA and Orange County rent increase, which is 3% plus the 5, which is 8%. So it's either one of those. And I'll just share that screen just 1 second, real quick, so you can see LA and Orange County, 8%. This is after 8 for I'm sorry, August 1st. And then Riverside, San Bernardino, Ontario County, 7.5%, San Diego, 8.8, the Bay Area, 6.3, other areas not listed there, 7.7. And again, this is, let me see, stop sharing that. This is this form here, this is just part of the form. So like you can go into your member account, go to forms, type in 1482, and this will come up and you can just reference that all year long, no matter what. And for those of you that are under the statewide rent control, it'll be listed there for you. Well, Dennis, man, we have a lot of questions here. How many more? You willing to work here for another 10 minutes or so?
I sure am. Always happy to help.
All right. So let's do it. Let me pull these up over here. Okay, Suzanne, do I need to worry about squatters if I have a vacancy?
As a matter of fact, you do, because these people jump into units and they create a fraudulent lease. And then when you call the police, they show them the lease, and therefore that you have to go through an eviction. We call that a forcible detainer, unlike an unlawful detainer. There is a way to prevent that, and that is that there's a form, a no trespassing form that you file with the local police department. And by doing that, you have to renew it every year. Then you post a no trespassing sign. If you have that filed that, hey, I have a vacant unit and I've given the local police department, like the LAPD or maybe the county sheriff, you've given them that form and they've registered that. Then if somebody breaks into your unit, you would have the right to call that local police department and have that person arrested. Jeff, do you have that form on your site?
I don't think we do. So that's
Well, then we can go to my site, and that's evict123.com. It's in the legal issues section, and scroll down and you'll see that form. I have one for LA City, I got one for LA County, but you can just change, the form is the same. You can just change it if you wanted to make it Inglewood or something to that effect. But yeah, and filed that. So if you have a property that's vacant, I can't tell you how many people are just jumping into these properties. So you want to file that form with the local police department and then put a no trespassing sign on the premises and you're good to go.
All right, Michael on YouTube. Is there a deadline to apply for small claims court to collect COVID-19 deferred rent from 2022?
Probably, if the tenant's still in possession, I would say there is nothing. There is no statute of limitations, but if the tenant's vacated, I think you have 4 years from when we were allowed to collect. So that would be from what, 2022, I guess. So, because that would be pursuant to a written contract.
Mhm. But that they're assuming you have to file it in small claims to be able to collect, which is not a correct assumption.
Well, you can collect in small claims court unlimited for rents owed from March of 2020 through September of 2021. That's unlimited jurisdiction. Otherwise, you're limited in small claims court to 12,500. But again, in terms of the answer to the question, is that you have 4 years if the tenant is vacated,
Mhm.
from 4 years from when the tenant vacated your unit to sue them.
Right, but what I'm saying is you can send them to collections, like you guys have a collections agency. They could send to your collection agency without having a judgment in small claims court, right?
Yeah. No, that's true. But in most situations, unless you have a judgment, getting done by a letter from a collection agency is not going to mean much.
All right. So yeah, with our collections thing, if you want, all you have to do is substantiate your claim with the rental agreement and other documentation, and then that will be reported you could report that to the collection agency. They report it to they have 30 days, tenant has 30 days to dispute it, but then it does go up on their credit report, which is helpful for everybody and potentially motivating for them to settle that thing. And of course, when you send it to a collections agency, they're going to take like 50%. You guys take 50% when you do a
We take
collection?
50% standard collection agency fee. But
50?
I can't tell you how much we go in the cost in terms of trying to locate assets. And when you don't
Yeah.
locate assets, of course, those costs are not sent to the client to pay for. And we check it every single year as our procedures.
Right. Okay. So Kevin here, is it acceptable to email a tenant the rent increase? No.
No, it's not. The issue is, what if you had that in your rental agreement that would be acceptable? I think that would be okay. But other than that, I don't think so.
Okay. If not, what else are we expected to do to get the ball rolling?
Again, you hand it to the tenant or mail it with a proof of mailing. And if you do mail it, it's an extra 5 days.
Okay, here we go. Next one. Trish, if you mail a notice, do you also need to post the notice on the tenant's door?
For a rent increase, the answer is no, you don't have to. Just mail it.
Okay, is the price gouging emergency being extended until the end of July with LA County?
I think it's July 7th. It was 6 months from January 7th, so it's July 7th, it's
I
over.
know they just extended it a month.
You know what? I didn't hear that. I looked for that. I could not find that. I know that if you're selling like building supplies and your con are extended to January, but I haven't heard that that's been extended in July.
Yeah,
Wait, did you see that someplace?
yeah, I
I heard
did.
it was over as of July 7th.
Okay, Alicia, do I need to mail renter protection notices with the rent increase notice for cities that are RSO?
It all depends the jurisdiction. For example, Los Angeles requires that you post notices on the property. So that wouldn't be mailing it with the rent increase notice.
Yeah, you got to post it. And again, we have that. We have one that's laminated, and it's changing like twice a year, which is really annoying. But yeah. All right, Alex, if email or text is okay to notify tenants. Okay, we already did that one. Okay, John, if I purchase a new property and the seller has already raised the rent within 1 year of purchase, can I still raise the rent once I become owner, or do I need to wait until that 1 year passes?
You step into the shoes of the previous owner, you have to wait 1 year.
Right. Okay. Angela, statewide rent control, two houses on one lot. owner occupying one, and then you rent it, are you under rent control?
Again, if it's two separate houses, that's not a duplex, so you are under rent control.
Okay, and do we have to say accept partial rent? We've talked about that. That's a no. Uh, let's see. City of LA under RSO apartment. A tenant sends his check late without the late fee. Do we have to accept it? Or can we apply the first 50 to the late fee and let them know they owe 50 on rent?
The answer is no. You can't. The debtor or your tenant determines what debt he is paying, not the creditor, also known as the landlord. So you could then serve him with a notice to perform or quit for the late charge, and that would be a proper lawsuit, and we've done those all the time.
Okay, and then in the city of LA, it's RSO apartment. A tenant is 2 months late on rent, and they send a payment for a full month. Do you have to accept it?
If the tenant owes 2 months and they're only paying 1 month, that's considered a partial payment. So as soon as the first of the following month approaches or is there, then you could reject that because at the time when he sent you the money, he owed you 2 months rent, and I'm not taking a partial payment.
Rebecca in San Diego asking is this the same or different in San Diego? Um, so statewide rent control is going to be the same. For San Diego, there's a tenant
Well,
protection ordinance that's slightly different than the LA
the
City.
rules regarding rent increases are is a state rule as to how you serve it and how much time you have to give and the manner. So that's true all up and down. Otherwise, you're dealing with a local rent control jurisdiction in the city of San Diego.
Right, yeah. So they don't have you don't have a specific rent control. You only have tenant protection ordinance that's specific to San
No,
Diego.
I don't go down to San Diego, but I think they do have their own rent control statute.
They don't. They don't. Yeah, they don't. It's a tenant protection. That's
Okay.
all it is. But anyway, Manny, I live in SFR in the city of Norwalk. How much can a landlord increase on a month to month? If I'm going to list a property for sale with tenants that have been there for more than 10 years, would that be the first step?
Well, again, if it's a single family home, there are no rent limitations, so you can go up to market value.
Yeah, there you go. All right, we are working through these. Do a couple more maybe?
Two more, my friend.
Okay. Amelia, we have a maintenance worker that lives in one of our units. He does not have any kind of rental agreement, work agreement. He was lower rent for work done for the owner at the property, but no longer does work for the owners. Can we ask him to sign an agreement at fair market rent?
Well, did they say what city?
They didn't.
Okay. Uh, More likely than not, the answer is no. All you can do is you are giving him the apartment for less value because of his services. So if he's not performing the services, then whatever discount you were giving, he just basically loses the discount, and therefore he has to pay you the rent, whatever that would be. But I probably would need more information to properly answer that question.
Right. And really, it almost sounds like they need Gary Gantro with labor law a little
Yeah.
bit, with a proper property management manager agreement. But even though he's not working anymore, that one's going to be a little complicated. Okay, last one. We'll just take the very last question that's here. Teresa, can we deduct COVID rent balances from the tenant security deposit once they move out?
And the answer is, of course. You are allowed to deduct from a security deposit unusual wear and tear, cleaning, and of course, any rent owed, and that's rent owed.
Right. All right. Well, there's that 800-77 evict. Hey, what you talking about this Saturday?
This Saturday, we're talking about questions that landlords ask that you must know.
Okay. So
And I
check 'em
do
out.
a show every Saturday. Thank you for bringing it up. It's called Zoom Landlord Tenant Talk Radio. It's every Saturday at 3 p.m., though you can watch it on YouTube Live or on Zoom. And you can get information by going to my website, evict123.com. And also, you'll see previous shows that I've done there.
Awesome. Well, thank you, my friend.
Always nice talking with you.
Yes, it is. Thanks everybody for joining us. And if you know people that need the information, go ahead and share the video with them and share about AOA. And hopefully we'll see you in August 20th. Dennis is going to be speaking at 1:15. So you got to get there bright and early for that one. And we'll have a great time.
Thanks, Jeff. Everybody, have a good day.
Okay, take care.